right, so let's talk about Parashat Vayigash, which is the reconciliation of Joseph, who's now the viceroy, second in charge of Egypt and under Pharaoh. And this is, as you tell from the reading, this is the most powerful land in the world, the richest in the world. And a big portion of that is due to Joseph's management, financial management of to prevent the famine, or at least to be prepared for the famine. I'll open up to discussion here. Go on, Sam.
No, just we have to say this is one of the greatest stories of all time. Just the reconciliation part of it is, of course, the highlight of the entire story, and it's just amazing. It's hard not to get taken in by this story with everything that's happened, and it's there's so many things here to look at. But the first thing that struck me, there's obviously the first part of it's very emotional, but when you go beyond that, you see that Joseph was actually able to acquire all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. And so this is kind of, especially in our day and age, in the United States, we like to have we have our ideal freedom, economic freedom, and this kind of goes against it, you would think at first, right? Because he took the entire land of Egypt and he basically put it under Pharaoh's hand. But then, of course, you have to consider that this was a very difficult situation. It was a severe famine. And had he not done something like this, everyone probably would have died of hunger. And so the people themselves were very grateful, even though they had to sell everything, which tells you how severe the famine was. And but beyond that, you see the generosity of Joseph when he's basically got them in the palm of his hand, and he can negotiate any terms he wants. He lets them keep 4/5 of what they make. And so this is an amazing act of generosity and just really wisdom as far as economic management. As we know from our experience in the U.S., when you give people freedom and you give them ownership, then magic happens, right? People start working and they bring all their ingenuity and everything and their creativity, and magic happens. And so this is what he did, and everybody was just I can't imagine how shocked they were to hear that they were going to keep 80% of everything they made after they had already told Joseph that they would be serfs to Pharaoh. So this is an amazing gesture on the part of Joseph.
Speaking of the land exchange, it talks about how the priests weren't taxed. That somewhat reminded me of how later on the Israelites are commanded to build cities for Levites and not tax them and stuff.
Right.
Well, the priests could survive because they were given an allocation. I'm assuming that's kind of like a stipend they were paid by Pharaoh, so they could continue to purchase food, or maybe that stipend was food and whatever they needed. Sam, I totally agree with you. It's one of my favorite parashot, I think, and because it is emotional. I mean, Netflix should do an updated movie on it.
Yeah,
and,
really.
It's a beautiful.
Well, but who's gonna try and top? Didn't Andrew Lloyd Webber do Joseph in the Technicolor Dreamcoat? Who's gonna try and top that?
Oh, that's why I said Netflix. That's the only one I could think that might top that. But good point, James. But I love the reconciliation. And then the thing that sticks in my mind, just like Sam, is what I've read this so many times over dozens of years. And it's the first time that it sticks out to me what a masterful monopoly play that was. You give them the choice. First, he gave his family land, which was, that could cause some ripples and jealousy with their neighbors and neighboring showing favoritism. But it was decreed from Pharaoh, so we assume, okay, people will accept it. It's from our ruler, and that's it. But then he goes on and says, be shepherds, be bountiful. Famine comes, they come in, and they don't have money left. So now it's liens on their property, on their flock, on their stock. And the masterful monopoly move, I think, here is that Joseph says, this is good for 1 year. He knows that there's going to be 7 years of famine. And this is year 2 that they come to him, or when he meets with them. So I'm assuming now it's now year 3, right? They've still got 4 years left of famine. What are they going to do after they run out of food this first year, which is year number 3? What are they going to do when they run out of food? Well, what a masterful move. And I think it's not happening just to Joseph's family and brothers. It's happening to everybody in Egypt. Like Sam said, everybody's got to give up the land here. Pharaoh takes over all the land. But look at the intelligence or the opportunity or opportunist move. He gives seed to them. Go on and plant your land. I still own it, but you get to work it and you get to keep 4/5 of it. And we're going to go on and keep replenishing our stock and bringing in to Pharaoh so he's got it. So I think it's just an all-around great parasha. I love it. So Ben Stiller would make the perfect Yosef. That's funny.
One thing I found interesting was the wording from Joseph that God has made me a father over Pharaoh.
Yes.
Which implies that this Pharaoh is not the same one as the previous parasha. And as I was talking about in the WhatsApp group last week, there is a Hebrew in Egyptian history who was both vizier over all the land of Egypt and also father to the next pharaoh. He was in charge of his education. And that pharaoh, this guy was the vizier of Amenhotep III and in charge of the education of Amenhotep IV. And Amenhotep IV eventually renamed himself Akhenaten and encouraged all of the nobles of Egypt to destroy their idols.
Well, that's interesting, James. So what you're referring to is the first verse in the third Aliyah. And it reads, so it was not you who sent me here, but God, who has made me a father to Pharaoh, lord of all his household, and ruler over the whole land of Egypt. Now hurry back to my father and say to him, thus says your son Joseph, God has made me lord of all Egypt. Come down to me without delay. I take that as he had done such a great business move, and the dependency was Pharaoh depended on Joseph. There was a great dependency on him because he's getting them through this famine, and maybe the egos kicked in again. You know, like he had his dreams with his brothers and father, and they were all upset that said, "What? We're bowing down to you?" You know, he always has this little tinge of ego, and I wonder if that's what is in here as well, or as an alternative.
Well, I mean, I think the father comment, I always took it as figurative.
Correct.
And
Right,
I
that's
was
what I'm thinking too.
yeah, we were talking about this yesterday, and this is a very well-known pattern in history where Jews become not the person directly in power, but they become a very powerful advisor to those who are in power, and they offer knowledge, they offer counsel, wisdom, ideas, creativity, but they're not directly in power, right? And we see this over and over with Joseph. We see it when he was bought as a slave in Potiphar's household, where Potiphar gave him everything he had. He was in charge of everything, except, you know, he wasn't the one in power. Same thing happened to him in prison. He was in charge of everything, but the warden was in power. And then the same thing happened to him with Pharaoh, where Pharaoh told him, "You will command everything, but I will outrank you on the throne." And so you see this pattern, and not just Joseph, of course. The other one that comes to mind is Daniel, who was a very powerful advisor to the king of Persia. And so you see this pattern
And
over and
Esther,
over.
of course.
Sorry?
And Esther, of course.
Right, Esther as well. Well, Esther was technically the queen, but she didn't really have, all that much power, I guess, directly. But she, you see this pattern over and over. And so the Jews, according to the Torah, are Leor Goyim, Mamlechet Kohanim. So they offer, this is what we have to offer, is we offer knowledge, we offer counsel. We've been taught things that no one else knows. And so in that way, we're always a father to those around us. And that's the type of relationship we should look to have with the Goyim. Not
And
to
more
compete
recent,
against them, not to destroy them or anything like that. It's to be a father to them, according to the Torah.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
and to use a more recent.
we have the name Abraham also. I think we always respect somebody who is higher by calling him Abba or father. We have to take it is not exactly a father. His meaning, it is a debt of gratitude. We have Abraham, it is already father of a multitude. When somebody is grand, we put that name to show, we call him father.
Mm-hmm.
In Morocco, for instance, we call everyone older, we call him Abba or father or Baba.
Nice. So I've got a question to pose here. Right before chapter 47 in the 6th Aliyah, he talks about his brothers being shepherds.
Mm-hmm.
And he plans with them. When Pharaoh asks you what you do, tell him you're shepherds.
Mm-hmm.
And here it says, for all shepherds are abhorrent to Egyptians. What does that mean? Why did he want them to tell Pharaoh that they were shepherds?
Because the Hyksos, this dynasty is a dynasty that comes as invader and displaces the original family of the Ramses. The Hyksos means shepherds. So he's telling them, there is going to be a commonality with the Pharaoh. You are a shepherd nation, and here are our brothers. They are also shepherds. And the notion for Egyptians, the shepherds are Egyptian to it. For all shepherds are abhorrent to Egyptians. This is the people who have been conquered. That he's telling to the Hyksos, you and we are common, we are shepherds, but we know that the Egyptians do not like shepherds.
Okay, thank you. That
That's
clears
yeah,
it up.
yeah, that's one aspect of it. The other aspect is that I think Joseph pretty obviously wanted his family to stay separate, right, from the rest of the population. He wanted them to live in their own place. And what better way to do it than to declare that you belong to an occupation that is abhorrent to the population? And so they will want to keep you separate. And that
Well,
way,
would you
so,
give the prime piece of real estate to somebody who is abhorrent to his neighbors? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm not so sure it was a prime piece of real estate. He said, Pharaoh said, give him the best of the land, but then he kind of told him, settle in Goshen. They had already asked for Goshen. So he just kind of told them, yeah, take the best. So if you want to, Goshen, go ahead. I'm not sure that it was the best. I mean, but it's possible. But
It was.
as we see later, the people of Israel did remain separate and eventually ended up leaving, right? And so it looks to me like this was all part of the plan. This was, I heard this one rabbi say, this was the first Jewish exile in history, right? It was the people of Israel had basically just been born because obviously Israel was still alive. These were his sons. And now they come to their first exile where they leave the land and they go somewhere else. And so this was to be a sort of the first experience of many exiles. And we see that he kept them together, and it was kind of separate from everyone else. And so I think that's where, at least that's one very strong element of what was going on here.
It was also a land of pasturage. Goshen was a very fertile pasture land. And they came with their flocks. We are told, even though they left a lot behind them, they came with their flocks. And therefore, that was the best place for them to be. Don't forget that there is going to be a famine. They come at the second year of the famine.
Right.
So Joseph has a foresight to put them there in Goshen, because where are they going to feed all these flocks that they have brought with them? And he mentions this to Pharaoh. They have come with their cattle and with their sheep. Therefore,
Yes.
it is logical for them to be in that land of pasturage.
Yes. Yeah. So I think, like, as happens many times, there are multiple elements to this, and we can just kind of see how the whole thing plays out.
Another observation, they bring Jacob finally, right? Israel, who's named Israel now. They bring Israel to meet Pharaoh, to first to see his long lost son Joseph, and then to meet Pharaoh. And before he leaves his home to make this journey, he tells his sons, I want to see Joseph, my son, before I die. I think it's amazing that all these forefathers had the sense or feeling that they knew they were going to die. And the way it's written, it always seems like they finish their mission or whatever, and they say, okay, now time to die. And boom, that's it. I don't know if that's literal, or is it over time they just fade away, or, Moses did it. We saw it in, last year. So it's interesting to me. Here's Israel. He comes. He said, "I'm 130 years old." When he responds to Pharaoh, "I'm 130 years old." He saw Joseph reconciles, and then it's time to go.
He stays 70 years. he lives for 17 years more.
Yeah. He didn't.
Yes, he's 130. He will die at the age of 147.
Okay.
Right.
So he's going to spend 17 years with his son in great comfort, in honor, and especially with his beloved sons. Like he said, the sons of my wife. He always mentions Rachel as his wife.
Well, maybe that reconciliation is what gave him the boost to live another 17 years.
For sure.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, he saw Joseph. He had Joseph for 17 years at the beginning of Joseph's life,
Right.
and then another 17 at the end of his life.
Was he that old when he was thrown in the pit?
Yes,
Well, yeah,
17
he was.
years.
It said at the very beginning of the story that Joseph was 17 years of age when the story starts. So we don't know exactly how much time elapsed with the whole dreams and his brothers hating him and everything, but it was pretty close to 17, I think. And
Correct.
and now he sees him for another 17 years. And you know how numeric the Torah is, so there must be something to this.
True. That's a very good observation.
Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah. I don't know what it means, but it's just interesting.
Any other input? I mean, or comments or thoughts? Mia, Justin, Absalom, anyone?
I see also the blessing that he blessed Pharaoh.
True.
That's
True.
interesting how he.
Very nice.
Yeah, I mean, you can imagine the status that Joseph must have had in Egypt at this point. I mean, it was obvious. Everyone probably said, you know what? We would all be dead if it wasn't for this guy. And so that's why I think, Nathaniel, you were mentioning maybe some jealousy. I don't know that there was much of that, because I think at this point, everybody was just like, oh my God, I mean, if it wasn't for this guy, we would all be dead. And so at this point, interestingly, Jacob blesses Pharaoh, and Pharaoh also asks Joseph, hey, if there's any other men in your family that are kind of like you, send them my way, put them in charge of my stuff, as if to say, I need more of you guys. And so it was I thought that was an interesting comment as well. But you see how, in times of crisis, when, ability becomes very, very highly prized, it becomes a matter of life and death, then people like this, are gonna shine. And when things are good is when all these bad things come back, jealousy, and people start plotting and everything. But when people see death at their doorstep, then things are very different. And that's what I think was going on here. But who knows?
Well, great discussion. We're over time as usual. One of my favorite parashas, and great feedback and input from everybody. So until next time, we'll continue on our journey through Egypt.